everyone. Welcome to this episode of Context is King. I'm Rebecca Brayton, and with me as always is WatchMojo founder and CEO Ashkan Karbasfrooshan to discuss employee monitoring software.
Sexy topic.
We're all very excited to talk about this. Okay, so you'd mentioned that at your old company, your employer monitored everyone's activity.
Yes.
So as an employee, how did you feel about that?
I don't think employees would like it in general. I didn't mind it. For one thing, I feel like in this era of...
And sorry, what did the monitoring
Well, it was kind of,
consist
it like you let them see everything you did, like when you were working in like a Word document or like online or on, yeah, it was basically they had access, like I guess they could click a button and see what you were doing. It was pretty intense. I didn't mind it because I already feel like we are under surveillance. Like we're probably too boring to want to be surveilled, but I feel between credit cards and mobile technology and social media, you know, everybody could see if you're, you know, and two, it's a bit contrarian, but like if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you care? Now, I don't like it if somebody, to be clear, is sitting there and watching my every move. That I don't like. But I kind of figure that nowadays, I was okay with it. Again, I'm very different. However, I do understand why employees wouldn't like it. But
Yeah. So now, as an employer, how do you feel about it?
Well, I've always, to be clear, we've never done that. I don't like it.
Or so they say.
No, we wouldn't be doing this if
No, I know.
So I obviously don't like it. I've not necessarily even really considered it. You could say, well, why are you doing the show? And we could touch on that in a few minutes. But I think it is a trend now where most companies are doing that. And I think it's just like we live in this era where in the late 90s, I'm aging myself, we used to think that we'd be online surfing privately, anonymously. It's the opposite. We check in everywhere we go. We allow our GPS notifications, and we allow, you know, to be tracked. And I think I actually like the personalization aspect of like search, where I like the internet to know a bit about me. It's like my views are a bit different, so long as it's anonymized, so to speak, right? So I've resisted it. Like I could see why some companies go for it, especially if you have a lot of employees, and you know, sometimes some employees do waste time, but I personally am not a fan. You know, and it is cliche. You're like, why would you hire people you don't trust? I think that's a bit naive and idealistic. In every organization, it's a normal distribution. It's a sample size. You're going to have the lazy. You're going to have the people that don't care. And it's not so much that I think as an employer I care. I think as a fellow employee, if you have fellow people slacking off, I think that's when a lot of employers then are like given to the temptation.
So I guess what you're saying is we wouldn't do this in the future?
Well, the reality is I would not do it. Where I think I'm sometimes prone to consider it, and I'm not like being a politician with the words, I mean, you know, let's say you hire a chief marketing officer. The first thing they do when they come in is they go, do you have any data? Do you have any insights? What focus groups have you done to have this understanding of your audience? So they want data. When you hire a technology guy or a product guy to come and spruce up your website, they're like, well, do you have any user engagement data? Are you saying that people come and spend 10 minutes, or do you have that data? So when I kind of talk to, and I love organizational behavior, human resources, I love psychology. Like, I wish I could be like a chief people officer if I wasn't doing what I was doing. Like, I like that. I like human resources. I mean, I like it all. I like marketing, I like finance. I like everything. I'm a geek in that sense. But when I talk to HR people, the first thing that they go is, well, like, you need data. So they're like, if you want to make decisions, they're like, you know, did you know that like 80% of companies do this? I fell off my chair. Like, if I had to write down a number, I would have said,
like all companies?
I shared you the articles. That's why we're doing it. I kind of want to open this up to be like, as an employer, as an entrepreneur, as an employee, how do you feel? This is the first of context where I learn from you as much as you learn from us. I was blown away. It was basically, it's been growing from like 20% like eons ago to 80% as of 2017. That's a big number. And I think it goes to show that unfortunately, there's this lack of trust, you know, between employer and employees. Or I hope it's more like, well, we want to protect the good employees who maybe don't want the laggards and the slackers.
It's not that.
It's not that? You don't
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, like I was very naive. I was like, you know, if I as an employer am loyal to my team, then over time they are loyal to the company because times have changed. This was like 15 years ago. But, you know, with age, you get a bit more realistic. And I think it just goes back to if you are an executive at a company, you want the data to be like, you know, the analogy I use, the example, not the analogy is, let's say our social media guy, if he is on Facebook 80% of his time, makes a lot of sense. But if somebody is hired to edit a video and they're on Twitter 80% of the time, and by the way, I may be on Twitter 80% of my time, well, I can understand why there's a problem, right? So if the video editor is like, I can't handle this, and I'm like, really? I believe them, but I can understand why people are like, well, what's the data say? And then you could have it. So I'm kind of floored.
Yeah, but theoretically, us having or anyone having an open office mitigates some of that.
That's okay. But generally speaking, the trend in organizations has been open office. So, but yet 80% of them have it. I mean, I'll link the article. I was floored. So I think it's a sign of the time, unfortunately, where, like there's this passengers on planes are treated as animals. I think by and large, and we've covered this, is a lot of companies, they treat we've talked about how they treat freelancers like crap. And I do think that there is this kind of you look at the travel industry, it's almost like they hate their clients. I think, unfortunately, a lot of organizations, they do have this kind of lack of trust with their workforce, I guess.
There was a line in the article that I liked, which was, what these companies gain in productivity might be lost in engagement and trust, especially if the business isn't transparent about how they're monitoring workers.
Yeah, So one reason why I was okay with back in my old job is I think by law, is we had to give permission, right? So
what happens if you don't?
You may not be able to work there, I'm assuming, because an employer is allowed by law to monitor what their employee does, but just has to notify them. Look, it's crazy. I could see a scenario if you work with Coca-Cola and you're one of the 4 people that knows the recipe, the formula. That I get. But it's also, imagine if you work, and I think the 80%, to be fair, is if you work at banks. Imagine you're doing fraud. I worked at customer service. One day, the RCMP, which is our FBI, the FBI, is RCMP not the FBI?
Maybe it is.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. What's
CSIS
CSIS then? CSIS is
CIA.
Okay.
Who knows? Whatever.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. The point is, they showed up and they whisked away a number of employees who were stealing credit card info.
Holy beans.
In a way, we're that's good that there was some kind of surveillance. And that was my old job. Anyway, what do you guys think?
Oh, is that it? Or is that the
No,
outro?
how do you feel? That's a better question. How would you have felt when you started off as a younger, less experienced employee? And more importantly, how do you feel now as a manager when, if you're in a meeting talking to one of your employees, you want to be able to have that data to be are you lying to me? You wouldn't say that, but are you well, the stats are different.
I have never thought that. My opinion hasn't changed.
What's our age difference? In a few years.
Nobody needs to know our age.
Nobody needs to go there. 20.
No, my opinion hasn't changed on it.
Okay. Which is?
I'm not for it.
No, that's why we don't have it. But let me ask you this. Let's say I left tomorrow. I just quit. I resigned. I
also think there's a big difference between if you are hired at a company that does this, or if the company you currently work at and have worked at for several years starts doing this. Yeah. There's a big difference there.
To me, the detail is important. But let me ask you a more, this is not a more realistic.
Context is king.
No, yeah, there you go. But let's say tomorrow I was literally look, I'm good. I'm going to go sit on a beach and do something else. I'm going to become a juggler. And Joe shows up. Joe's the new boss. Or Shelly. Shelly shows up. Shelly says, look, at my old company we did this. It helped. Because we also found a way that this could help employees. Do you quit, or are you
No, I wouldn't quit.
That's what I'm saying. We're not doing this, but I was blown away, and I learned something every day.
All right. I guess get a second email, people. I don't know.
And a third, and a fourth, and a burner phone.
Yeah, exactly.
But then do you mind that the government monitors us?
I don't mind. Okay. So.
Wouldn't you mind more the government than the employer?
Because how are they going to use it against me? My work has a lot, that's the thing. I feel like people are blowing off steam about work while at work a lot more frequently than anything serious that the government needs to take into account.
But I think the issue is that's a fair game unless then the employees are I can't do my job, or they complain about something.
What do you mean it's fair game?
I think the issue then is if an employee then says something, I can understand why some employers, when you're managing thousands of people, you want the data to know maybe there's a reason. The government is different. The government is doing it, not that they care if you're buying too many cookies. They want to make sure you don't go Al-Qaeda on them, mainly.
No, I get that.
So I feel like the government almost should do it.
Yeah, but I feel like
the government's not
more
paying
people
you.
can get in trouble at work
Yeah, but my
It's
point is
easier
you're
to get
paying-
in trouble
First of
over
all, I'm against it all as an individualist, but as a pragmatic, I feel the difference is the employer pays you. And again, I as the employer don't like this. I'm saying when I was the employee, to be clear. When I was an employee, my mindset was the employer is paying me, yet I am paying the government through taxes. So, and sure, they're providing services. So I was like more okay with my employer doing it because I was like, I am getting paid by them. So in that sense, the reason why I didn't do it is because I was very utopian and idealistic about things. But when you talk to professionals, they're like, get with the program. Most companies do this. Now the reasons I agree, I think you're right. It's a lack of trust and like a kumbaya, we want to protect the good apples, but what do you think? Comments, let us know.
See you next time.
And while you're commenting, your employer is watching probably.
Probably.
But I am not.
All right. Well, if you can even get YouTube at your work and you're watching it there,
But isn't it good
congratulations.
that we have the show and we talk about this? I would love, here's the thing.
I feel like everybody who's watching it
this-
in the office is yelling at me for not like hitting you harder about it.
I'm against it. How much more can I be? But actually what I think is cooler is I would love it if anybody who watches this sends it out at their office and starts a whole conversation about does our employer do this and how do we feel about it?
No, but you have to know.
You have to know, but sometimes you forget. I think most people, when they sign on to a job, they just sign, they read it, but this is like buried somewhere in their employment agreement.
Right.
So I'm going to guess actually a lot of people don't know as well.
Yikes. Okay, but I'm sorry. I know I'm dragging this on a little bit, but like, what is employee monitoring? Like, are they reading your emails constantly?
I don't
or
know.
like
I
what?
didn't read the article even to the extent you did. I just saw the stat and I was blown away. My guess is, and I just know this because you know when you're doing a presentation, you share your screen. You could be like, hey, this is the demo I'm giving you. The other person can't go and start doing, what do you?
Nothing. I'll tell you after.
Okay. So I'm assuming it's that. You could kind of go and be like, what is this person doing now? Which is a bit eerie, but I'm going to also guess, it's just with the way it is.
But
it's like,
do they? That's what I'm asking.
I think if there's a problem, like if a
Right.
guy is suspected, he's like, hey, he's driving a Bentley.
Okay.
He's probably stealing like credit card info. I mean, again, I don't think we do it when you're producing top 10s.
Well, but
I
that's
think
my
it's like
question,
if you work in insurance, if you work in financials. But I also think that it could be aggregate. Like, hey, let's say, I mean, we work in media, so we kind of have to be on Twitter and Crapster and all this. But imagine you work at the bank. Why is Shelley spending 57% of her time on Facebook? And why does this entire department spend 90% of their time on TikTok? I think it's more in the aggregate. But I wouldn't know.
No, who wouldn't know? Air quotes. No.
Yeah, so we're doing a whole show about it transparently.
All right. Well, as we've said 3 times, let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time.